And we're at chapter 7, verse 15 of the book of Judges. And it was so, when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped, and returned unto the host of Israel, and said, Arise, for the Lord has delivered into your hands the host of Midian. Notes, the fear is gone and faith remains. Basically, what I read in the last part of that verse back there in verse 14 and 13 is that basically if you've got a frisbee and God is behind you, you can throw it into the enemy's camp and it will do damage. Now, a little bit of a ridiculous way of explaining that, but basically that happened with David and Goliath. He threw that stone at the giant, and the giant he's dead now. So little is much if God is behind it, is what the whole idea of that is. Anyways, verse 16, and he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, with empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, Look on me, and do likewise, and behold, then I come to the outside of the camp. It shall be that as I do, so shall you do. Notes, the 300 men were to basically watch Gideon and do exactly what he was doing. The Lord, no doubt, had given him instructions as to exactly what he should do. Verse 18, When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow your trumpets, also on every side of all the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Notes, all were to blow the trumpet at a given signal, and all were to shout, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Verse 19, So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch, and they had but newly set the watch, close to 11 o'clock at night, and they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. Notes, they were told to bust these clay pots. Anyways, verse 20, And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. Notes, fear had already gripped the enemy, and with the shouting, the glowing lights from the broken pitchers, along with the blowing of the trumpets, they imagined all sorts of things, which is exactly what the Lord intended. Verse 22, And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. Notes, the Midianites, thinking the enemy was upon them, not being able to see in the dark to distinguish friend or foe, mistook their own people and were running them, and they basically started killing one another. Friendly fire, only it was like a friendly sword to the stomach. Anyways, and the host fled to Beth-shittah in Zereroth, and to the border of Abel-Meholah unto Tabath. And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, and out of Asher, and out of all of Manasseh, and pursued after the Midianites. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all Mount Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites, and take before them the waters unto Beth-barah and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together, and took the waters unto Beth-barah and Jordan. Notes, to cut off the potential escape of the Midianites, that's the reason why they're doing this. Verse 25. And they took 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb, and they killed Oreb upon the rock Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the wine presses of Zeb, and pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side Jordan. Notes, now this is actually celebrated in the 83rd Psalm, verse 11, and Isaiah chapter 10, somewhere in there. I think it's verse 26. But basically, we learn from this just how important was the victory which the Lord gave to Gideon. Okay? Chapter 8, And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why have you served us thus, that you called us not when you went to fight with the Midianites? And they did chide with him sharply. Notes, well, Gideon had not consulted with them and nor asked for any help. And now that the war had been so successful, the men of Ephraim were displeased at not have been consulted. Well, quite frankly, if it was me, I'd just be happy that the enemy was out of the way. Anyways, verse 2. And he said unto them, What have I done now in comparison of you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? Notes, Gideon seems to have known the answer of Solomon even some 500 years before the birth of that king. The soft answer turns away wrath. Proverbs chapter 15, right off the get-go. Verse 3. God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison of you? Then their anger was abated towards him when he had said that. Notes, he's saying, the men of Ephraim had captured the two mightiest princes of the Midianites. What are you bellyaching about? Who cares? They're gone. They're no longer in our hair. Verse 4. And Gideon came to Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men who were with him, faint yet pursuing the enemy. And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people who follow me, for they be faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread unto your army? Notes. For fear that Gideon would fail, and thereby that the Midianites would rise back up, they refused even food to his weary followers. That's a sad condition. It is very, very sad when petulance is shown because of a seeming slight in connection with the Lord's work, as it was with Ephraim. But it is so much sadder when sympathy is shown to the enemy and help is refused to the servants of God who through faith are yet pursuing. The problem witnessed here is all too often the problem in the modern church. Many Christians, instead of helping to win victories for the Lord, try to hinder those who are actually the ones winning the victories. Verse 7. And Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. Notes. Now, it is not exactly clear as to exactly what is meant by these statements concerning punishments. The lack of faith among the people of Succoth is what seems to have irritated Gideon the most, and rightly so. But he's basically saying there's going to be a payday someday. Verse 8. And he went up thence to Penuel, and spoke with them likewise, and the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered him. Notes. Now, from all of this, we see that Israel had become very, very fragmented, with each tribe somewhat standing on its own. In other words, close to the place of being 12 distinct nations, pretty much. That's not exactly what God had planned. Verse 9. And he spoke also unto the men of Penuel, saying, When I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. Notes. Now what this tower is, we were not exactly, the scripture is basically silent. Verse 10. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Krachor, and their host with them, about 15,000 men, all who were left of all the host of the children of the east. For there fell 120,000 men who drew sword. Notes. Now, as is pretty obvious, Israel had won a striking victory. And we must strike out right now at chapter 8, verse 11 of the book of Judges. Thank you, and God bless.